Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Serene Speaks, a commentary series on my channel where I talk about sociological issues relevant to modern day society with maybe a little bit of psychology, philosophy, history, and anthropology thrown in. So, if you'll pardon me for now while my radio personality is still in development, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. So, apparently, this one news article pops up in my feed one day, and apparently, it's really newsworthy when a woman says that she likes being a housewife. Now, as with both sides in the internal trad wife versus career woman argument, both sides do tend to have lots of rhetoric and bias. On one hand, and I'm speaking anecdotally, I've seen housewives paint today's society as a dichotomy between submissive women. What does that even mean? And modern women again. What does that even mean? Okay? Semantics, you guys. However, it's not the TikTok that got me thinking, but rather the fact that the news media is even reporting about it in the first place. You've heard the media harp on it over and over and over again. You know, women run the world, women rule the world, women can be whatever they want to be, the future is female, da 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 da. But oh my god, some woman decides she wants to be a housewife and suddenly the entire media conglomerate, well, a woman wrote this article in this case, so let's just say women that write about housewives in general, suddenly the media and women in the media are setting up firestorms and controversies, and it's almost like, it's not the patriarchy telling women how to be, but rather it's women telling other women how to be. Now, apparently I'm not a traditionalist, and God knows I don't really particularly care for the American trad wife aesthetic, because a lot of them are doing the whole her, look at me, I'm submissive type of flaunting on TikTok and social media outlets, when I have a hunch that real housewives don't really have time for like a lot of this type of flaunting, but I think more outlandish than that is that the media is singling out women for not conforming to their ideas of quote-unquote woman empowerment, whatever that even means these days. Like, yeah, housewifery is not a high status position, but like, who cares? They can pay their taxes, they run the household, they bring up stable children, they live quietly, so who cares? So after thinking about the motivation behind the media firestorm, I kind of sat on it, and it occurred to me that maybe the whole eternal career versus housewife debate, which one is a better choice, maybe it's just not so much driven by men like we traditionally think, but it's really driven by other women, especially today in the 21st century. I mean, think about it. Maybe the real fight between traditional women and women hanging high on the totem poles of society are what's really going on today, both fighting for moral dominance in the public spotlight. So despite your leading ladies in the media telling you that it's actually men oppressing you, like this one thought catalog says, God, this is why I hate thought catalog, just low-hanging fruit right there. Maybe the real fight here that we're witnessing isn't between men and women, but rather it's women versus other women, for several reasons. Let's unpack this with a couple real-life anecdotes. For example, the term slut-shaming. What does it mean according to the Google lexicon? Oh, of course, because we have to consult the Google lexicon for this. It is the practice of criticizing people, especially women and girls, who are perceived to violate expectations of behavior and appearance regarding issues related to sexuality. I heard mostly women going off about this term. Maybe some of you are already generalizing when I ask, okay, who's doing the shaming? And maybe some of my more feminist viewers might say, it's the man, they're doing the shaming, they hate women or something. But with all due respect, if I can provide another angle on this, would men really hate the person that provides them with something for free? Like, men wouldn't want a serious relationship with a booty call, but that's not hate, it's just called getting the milk for free. So I never really did believe the theory that it's a systemic thing that men are built and bred for the sole purpose of shaming women. In fact, historically, in civilized societies, women had the power to withhold the fun bags from the men in order to negotiate their desires. So I don't think it's genuine to say that men had the power all the time, every time. In fact, I think it's women that shame other women more often than not. Why? Simple. Mating competition. That's what it comes down to. So there's a study where researchers compared the sexily dressed women to the modestly dressed women and studied the reactions to the control groups from other women. So sexily dressed women, shamed immediately. Modestly dressed women, nobody gave a hoot. So in conclusion, and I quote, sex is coveted by men. Accordingly, women limit access as a way of maintaining advantage in the negotiation of this resource. Women who make sex too readily available compromise the power-holding position of the group, which is why many women are particularly intolerant of women who are or seem to be promiscuous. So basically, in Evolutionary History 101, the normie women try to test the alpha male's loyalty by withholding sex for a while, but the vixens cheat the system by giving them the yup yup for free right away, and the normies do not like that. Something you also got to know about the evolutionary psyche of men as well. While males are built to spread their seed to make sure that their gene pool won't die, at the same time they're also built to be committed to one woman at a time so that they can assure their paternity. And mind you, we're just speaking from a more evolutionary psyche. I don't want you to think that I'm speaking about this like in a caveman mindset, but anyways, they just want to assure their paternity, at the same time spread their seed. That's kind of how they're built. And women don't like the perceived vixens because the males then spread his resources to her instead of the non-vixens. And that's when this conflict of interest arises, because that's when the females start to get particularly catty. Which is why the term slut-shaming is a very, very disingenuous term, and dare I even say a gaslighting technique for ill-intentioned people to just shut you up and call you a bigot so that you won't stand between them and the high-value male that they're so craving. But the female sex doesn't just fight each other for the men, mind you. It can apply to other coveted items like publicity and social status. Like, remember when Chelsea Handler called Marjorie Greene a harlot in order to smear her in public and gain further clout? Pot calling the kettle black? Unsurprising. Now, mind you, I'm not a fan of either of them, obviously, but I'm just pointing out one example of a power play between women in positions of power. Very evolutionary explanations, primal you can even say, but they're not without merit. So there you have it, one example of this pecking order enforced by women for special interest reasons, be it status, mating, personal interest, you call it. And in our modern-day society, how do the higher-up women maintain that order? By proclaiming that everything is a dichotomy between man oppressor and woman oppressed. And if you step outside of the group, think, oh, you poor slut, don't you see you're feeding into the sexually repressive patriarchy? Germaine Greer is a classic example, telling us women that we were always treated like breeding sows by the men, and that the only way to be free is to bring up a radical revolution, to give up monogamy and separate our libido from our own entities. Never mind that women create more oxytocin than men, which bonds them to their lovers after sex. It's just a biological fact. Never mind that Deborah Soh, liberal sexologist, explains in her book that we can't just override millions of years of evolutionary adaptations, never minding individual differences that do deviate from the norm. Also, riddle me this. Around the turn of the 20th century, do you think that most women were really ready to embrace Greer's ideas that the world is an eternal power battle between men and women? Well, some women sure agreed with that, but if we look at it from an individualistic perspective, I would say that most women did not even look at men as an oppressor, and they didn't view themselves as oppressed. Like, did you know that prior to the right to vote for women, most women actually didn't want that right? That's right, they didn't. They didn't want to vote because they didn't want more equality-based legislation that would lead to absolute equality and in turn get them drafted. And we have seen, by the way, bills like that pop up today, and since by default women are physically weaker, that honestly scared me, which is why I never considered myself a proponent of absolute equality in the first place. So were most women at the time internalized misogynists because they opposed the right to vote? Not that simple. There's a video interviewing women around the feminist movement, asking them if they were happy with their lives as housewives and homemakers, which they were. Most of them were. They didn't care for all the feminist emancipation. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, by the way. I'm saying it is what it is. And I'm also not saying that, it was like this, ergo all women should be like this today. No. I'm saying that women weren't always foaming at the mouth, trying to unshackle themselves from a patriarchy of sorts. And here's another example where we can't just simply write things off as just an internalized misogyny. So, female genital mutilation, it's still practiced in some parts of Muslim and African countries with the belief that it's going to make a girl less likely to cheat. Do you know who really enforces those practices? Women, typically mothers and grandmothers. Internalized misogyny, not that simple. Another example, foot binding done to make Chinese women look more desirable. Again, who do you think enforced those norms? Women, mothers, and grandmothers. Why? Because survival techniques, you guys. Again, not that simple. And given Sephora's and Fashion Nova's billion-dollar fashion industry today, I think it's not fair to say that it's always the patriarchy enforcing oppressive beauty standards, because women are setting them up amongst each other. Men are just responding by saying whether they like them or not, and usually they do like women in makeup. And the fact that we still have beauty standards, and the type of beauty standards we have today, have less to do with a boogeyman patriarchy and more to do with a woman's mating call technique. Also, remember when I said that the women who cry slut-shaming tend to be hypocrites because it enables them to tear down the competition? Rules for thee but not for me type stuff? Yeah, I have a theory that the sexual revolution in one aspect is hypocritical because it focuses more on the male shamers, but it doesn't acknowledge that women also shame other women for whatever self-serving purpose they got because, women are too much of the holy cow to do much wrong. For example, my coworker wore something on the more revealing side at work because, when you're gifted with such ample chest like her, let's say, it's harder to find one shirt where you can just stuff everything all in, so sometimes you gotta let them hang a little loose. Anyways, a customer complained about my friend's outfit. That customer was a woman. Not a man, mind you, a woman. And I live and work in a very liberal part of town. I mean very liberal. So one would think, oh, they're so pro-sexual expression. Nope, it's all fun and freedom with the sexual revolution until Karen sees a young girl mimicking her own glory days. Ugh, what an irony. Now, feminist psychologists can play devil's advocate and decree that this competition persists because, internalized misogyny, but I beg to differ. Listen, if women hating was so ingrained in men, then I don't think Western Enlightenment would have spread to so many parts of the world, around the world even. And the concept of free will was always unraveling in lieu with the technology of our time. So, for all the white men blaming, it's actually the white men that gave women the right to vote. White men created the birth control pill. They legalized abortions. They created the revolutionary Sex and the City TV show. Okay, gay men, but still white men. So it's almost like men today don't have a vested interest in putting women down just because, today it's simply just not going to benefit them, let alone in the 21st century. And I'm not saying that there wasn't gender inequality in the past. There was. But it was much more complicated than just chalking everything down to patriarchy. For one thing, you had a lot of biological limitations, like no birth control, stark class division, nobles versus peasants. And since a trend occurred repeatedly in society that, quote, men appear to seek overt political power for direct reproductive gain while women seek resources for themselves and their offspring, the men were like, psh, the women can just then go reproduce and we can just go to war. Throw in the absolute effed up conditions that Mother Nature allocated towards each of the genders. The women because we could die in childbirth, and the men because war. We were all equally effed. Then Western Enlightenment eventually catered to the supply and demand of both men and women alike, as technology created more personal freedoms and the middle class formed. Can't say the same about countries like Russia at the turn of the 20th century, because when the monarchy collapsed, communism ensured that we were all equally poor and miserable. Well, I think it's safe to conclude that men are definitely not the only ones who have an opinion on the whole career woman versus housewife debate. Actually, I don't even think they care. I think they'll support whatever you do as long as you can make it work. I think the debate is really fueled by other women due to socioeconomic status signal. Because before you won apple pie contests and that was a signal that you could hold down your man. Now the signal is to push as many girls as possible into STEM-related jobs or throw celebrations for the first female CEO of something or something. Housewives / stay-at-home moms really, I think, don't hold too much in the way of socioeconomic status. They're more like the hidden backbone of society, kind of like how your average Amazon delivery guy or your average plumber is. And then the tradcons fire back by saying, well, we are valuable too, just in a different way, da 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 da. And that is where all the controversy ensues. Also, is it just me, or do you notice that a lot of articles like that just pay mere lip service to the women that choose not to think and vote and live the same way as the mainstream ideology tells them to? Like, what if the women you're trying to free actually like being in whatever role that you're trying to free them from? I know, because let me tell you a little secret. I used to be that type of girl who also disregarded what other women actually wanted. For instance, I once ranted to my mother about how I knew a guy who was a huge player, let's just say, before he married a virginal Filipina girl. Oh, that guy's a hoe, and the girl is a dummy who's just setting herself up for abuse and manipulation. And that was my attitude. That was what I complained to my mom. And my mom was like, but dude, what if she just loves the guy? Who are you to speak for her? Like, don't you understand how male and female biology works? And that's when it kind of clicked for me right then and there. And when I mention biology, I just mean to say that statistically, men on average tend to garner more partners over a lifetime than women. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying that's the biological proclivities and differences between men and women. So, one of the reasons why I'm an individualist today, not a feminist, is because feminism presupposes what is right for all women. Individualism lets people live their own lives without any moral monopoly dominating the discourse, because in feminism, it inevitably does dictate what path of life is better for women. For all the feminist successes and shortcomings, for all the feminist hashtags on Twitter of girl boss and yes queen, feminist celebrities, feminist baby, oh, oh Jesus, all the assets that demand this power balance between men and women, feminism noticeably still hasn't squelched the pecking order between women. And now that we do have more power than ever in society, we fight. And oh boy, do we fight hard for that power. Interpret as you will.